Hey everyone, my name's Evan Lewis, and this is Both Sides of the Product, Perspectives from a Sales Leader turned Product Manager. Let's dig in. So I want to start off with three core reasons why you should care and why you should listen to this conversation. We may have never met before, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background on a little bit of my experience and hopefully why this talk will be worth your time today. Number one is I've been working in early stage SaaS startups nonstop since 2012. So going on 7 years, I guess. And I've had a ton of battle scars from trying to build companies. I started a company right out of school, and then I got into another SaaS startup and another one. And that leads me to point number two, which is I've failed a lot. I've had a ton of failures throughout my career, but I wouldn't trade any of those for the world because that's led to a tremendous amount of great lessons learned, and it's helped me figure out, the signal from the noise in terms of how to actually go about building good companies. And the third one is that I've played a number of different roles in my startup career that I think give me some pretty unique perspectives. So I started out as a founder, then I turned into a sales individual contributor, then a sales leader, and then I'm now working full-time as a product manager at PostBeyond. So I think that mix of, within that sort of 7-8 year time frame, having done a lot of different roles, gives me some fairly unique perspectives on SaaS growth, which I hope you find interesting in this talk today. So the three main things that we're going to cover in this conversation. Number one, I'm going to dig into why I believe product-led growth is the future of SaaS. Obviously, if you're tuning into the Product-Led Summit, you've got some idea of product-led growth being an important topic, but I'm going to share some of my ideas for what I've seen in terms of patterns in SaaS and why I believe product-led growth is the future. Number two is I'm going to try to prove to you why I think product managers have more impact on revenue than account executives. So get excited for that. And number three is if you are thinking about transitioning from sales to product, which is traditionally a fairly non-linear path, and something that, if you are in a sales role, you wouldn't often think that salespeople could be successful in product. That's a transition that I've made, and I've seen some patterns for what makes salespeople successful product managers. And so I'm going to share some of those patterns that I've seen and how salespeople can really excel in a product role. So I won't spend too much time on this because it's boring. You don't want to know too much about me, but essentially I've had a roller coaster of a SaaS career so far. Started with a business degree, then dove into code head first, learned Ruby on Rails, front end, web design and development. Got into my first startup at 22 and was doing mostly product. That company failed. Got into PostBeyond as the first sales hire, sold for about 3.5 years, then had a bit of an identity crisis where I wasn't exactly sure what type of work I wanted to be doing. And now I'm PostBeyond's first product manager. So if you want to boil that down and put it into emoji terms, which is kind of fun, essentially I went from choosing entrepreneurship over investment banking to falling in love with building products on the web, to being extremely code happy, thinking that I knew everything when really I didn't. Built a lot of product, which led to my startup failing miserably. Built a bunch of stuff that people didn't exactly want. Then, towards the bottom here, I thought my first company failed because we didn't sell. So I wanted to learn how to sell. And that is why I got into PostBeyond, learned to sell in a lot of different capacities for 3.5 years. And then about 6 to 8 months ago, had a bit of a crossroads where I said, sales is fun. I've learned a tremendous amount. The money is great, but I really started to see these patterns emerging. And I started to, itch for more creativity, for more impact on revenue, and just to do, something to help the company scale. And ultimately that led me to product. So again, it's been a winding road, both sides of the product, and happy to be back on the product management side currently. And yeah, like I said, the sales journey was amazing. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I made the switch back to product. And there's really two core reasons, or two trends in SaaS that I've seen emerge over the past, specifically the past 3 or 4 years, that have led me to want to switch back to product. The first one is the emergence of these hyper-growth models from product-led SaaS companies. So you think about the Slacks, the Vidyards, the Drifts of the world. These are companies that reduce friction. They let anyone into the top of their funnel. They have, get started or try it out buttons on their website. And ultimately, the more that they reduce friction, the more that they let users in to get value from their product without having to pay a dime, the more that they grow faster, right? So product-led companies are customer obsessed. They want to let the user realize value without needing to talk to a salesperson or put in their credit card. And, they let the product speak for itself, and that's how they drive growth, amongst other things. So, as I've seen these companies grow incredibly quickly, I've seen, the power of product-led growth firsthand. The other key trend that I saw is the change in buyer expectations. So when you think about when I was selling, it would be a constant battle to be talking to prospects who said, do you have a free trial? Can I get an account? Do you have some sort of freemium experience? I want to try before I buy. And that's a trend that I believe is not going away. Buyers want to try before they buy. They want experience first and advice second. So that's a very different model from, maybe 5, 6 years ago, where people were very used to, requesting a demo, getting on an intro call, getting on a discovery call. That's still a model that works today. Lots of companies have the request a demo on their site. We do at PostBeyond. We're working towards a product-led growth model. But the reality is products need to be able to stand and sell on their own to some degree without sales. And if you're not adapting to these changes in buyer expectations, you're not growing as quickly. That's the reality. People want to get their hands on a product and then, experience it, get as much as they can out, and then talk to someone to get advice. Just to illustrate the power of product-led growth, I wanted to tell the story of the tale of 3 funnels. And this is actually a true story from a purchase that I made very recently. So when I started in the product role at PostBeyond, I was charged with a number of different things, but one is we needed to build out a best of breed product technology stack. And as part of that, we were looking to buy a number of different pieces of technology, but for one in particular, we identified that this was the highest priority for us. And so I went in and started doing research. I looked at a number of different players in the space, and I ended up with sort of 3 top selections. So the first selection, I went to their website, I requested a demo. We ended up getting on an intro call and a demo with a sales rep. The sales rep was good. I went to the website, looked at some of their content. I went to G2 Crowd and looked at their reviews. Everything was fairly okay, right? That led us to doing some sales back and forth, and we had 2 phone calls with this company. Cool. The next business took a fairly similar approach. We requested a demo on their website. The sales rep was quite knowledgeable, and their product was pretty robust. They had good content on their website, and they had fairly strong G2 Crowd reviews. That led us to a bunch of emails back and forth. We had a number of phone calls. I brought in some different folks from my team to evaluate, and I also got deeper into some of their content downloads on their website. Now, the third company took a very different approach, and I really want to illustrate here, this is the power of product-led growth in flipping the funnel and catering to how people want to buy today. So rather than having me request a demo and create all this friction by talking to sales, first step was test it out, try the product, get your hands dirty, and really, start building out some of the core flows and pieces of functionality that you would want if you were to actually purchase the product right away. So I got my hands dirty, started using the product, downloaded the browser extension, And after I had, I gotten the experience, I was excited about the experience, then I was able to reach out to sales for help. And I really want to highlight that point because coming from the sales seat formerly, as a salesperson, the most powerful position you can be in is if you're in a position of expertise. If you're the one who is giving guidance, you've got the expertise and you're teaching the prospect. That's how you really know you're in a good situation, is if the prospect is looking to you as a resource. And this product-led growth model is perfect because I can get the experience first, and then I reach out to sales second, and it immediately puts them in a position of expertise. And it just so happened that when I did reach out, they were extremely helpful, very knowledgeable. The product experience I had was really good, and their reviews were extremely strong. So that led us to, not only did we have the typical sales engagement, we actually had less phone calls, but we had the added benefit of building out several product flows that were shown hundreds and hundreds of times. So I knew the product worked, and ultimately that's the purchase I went with. So it just shows how flipping the funnel and focusing on a product-led go-to-market strategy can really help you drive revenue. This is another thing that I like to sort of nerd out on. I really believe that product-led growth is the future because you can understand true buying intent with product usage. Let me explain what I mean there, because as a salesperson formerly, it's incredibly difficult to tell the signal from the noise. As a salesperson, you're always trying to understand, is this person real? Are they going to buy this week, this month, this quarter? How do I know that? And the typical data that you have is, are they opening my emails? Are they responsive to my calls? Maybe they're reading some content on the website. And the magic here of product-led growth is if you can get your product in the hands of the prospect during the sales process, and you can understand if they're actually getting in and getting value from their product. Are they inviting people? Are they getting to those core metrics that are they investing their time and energy into the product? That is such a more clear and true show of buying intent than downloading some content or spending some time on the website, because you can be kicking tires and just educating yourself for months and months and months. But if you're spending time to actually get into the product and get deep into it, you're much more likely, at least in my experience, to be ready to buy. And if sales is armed with that buying intent and usage intelligence, it makes a sales team so much more productive because they can understand who's real and who's not quite ready. So I have a secret. I moved from sales to product full time to get closer to revenue. Now, before you freak out, let me explain. There's 3 core reasons why I fundamentally believe someone like a product manager is closer to revenue or has more impact on revenue than sales. And again, this is coming from a former salesperson, the patterns that I've seen on both sides, and really why I think product, especially in today's world of SaaS, is so much more impactful on revenue than sales. And we're going to break this down into the core components of a SaaS funnel. So number 1 is acquisition. Exactly like we just said with that product-led growth approach in the tale of 3 funnels, product can accelerate acquisition. So in an age where buyers are extremely skeptical, people are going to buy based on the product. And if you can give your buyers a great free product experience during the sales cycle, buyers are much more comfortable and motivated to move quickly. So I really want to highlight the word comfortable there, because having done lots of deals in SaaS, buying is difficult, right? Ultimately, you need as a buyer to rally a number of different stakeholders. You need to build a business case. The bigger the purchase, the more decision makers that are going to be involved. And if as a prospect or a buyer, if you're not comfortable bringing all those people in, you're not going to move very quickly, and the deal's not going to close half as fast. So getting your product into a prospect's hands and getting them to feel, this isn't vaporware, this is a real thing, it works, it's easy to use, that makes people much more likely to buy quickly rather than, having to just go on a salesperson's word that the product actually works. So product accelerates acquisition, top of funnel. Then once someone becomes an actual customer, I've seen firsthand that product carries the weight of retention. So we all know that in SaaS, any company wants to minimize churn. And what's the most common reason that people churn? In a SaaS business, you have your platform, you have services, you have content, etc. Ultimately, your services can only go so far, right? You can have the most amazing team, but if the product is a letdown, if the product doesn't automate usage and engagement, if the product isn't sticky enough to bring people back for more, ultimately, people they're not going to stay with you for years and years and years. The product experience has to be able to stand on its own, and it has to be able to carry the weight of automating retention and engagement. Now, number 3 is product has the power to automate expansion. So if you think about, the models like a Slack, right? For any of you who are listening here who have bought Slack or been involved with purchasing that product, when's the last time you talked to a Slack salesperson? You probably never have, right? But pretty likely that you got a few people on, maybe you got one team onto Slack and then they invited more teams, and that the product automated the invite, the expansion, the additional licenses, and it automates the conversion of new users to habitual users to, extremely loyal users, right? So that's something that ultimately sales can't do. Sales, as much as they want to sell additional licenses, they can sell the dream of expansion, but product has the ability to actually fulfill and then automate that expansion. I need to clear my throat, sorry. I just get so excited about this stuff. Cool, so those are 3 core reasons across the funnel why I think product is closer to revenue than sales. Here's another interesting take on it. So if you think about purchasing decisions and you think about SMB purchasing decisions versus mid-market versus enterprise. On the left here, we've got an SMB. So let's say this is up to $5,000 a year in terms of annual contract value. If you're buying a product that's that small, how do you think about your purchasing decision? My argument is, and this is a disclaimer that the figures above are estimates. This is just based on my experience. If you're making a smaller purchase, 80% of that purchase is going to be because of the product and the experience you have with it. Likely, you're not going to be talking to a sales rep very much, so maybe 5% of that purchasing decision is based on your experience with a rep, and some of it may be influenced by content. So, an SMB purchase, you're probably spending more time with content than you are with sales, and services probably aren't even a thing. So, in that case, the smaller the purchase, the more the onus is on product to actually sell itself. Then when you get into mid-market, it becomes a little bit more balanced. So I actually stole these figures from one of our sales reps. He told me that he believes about 50% of the purchasing decision in the mid-market is based on the product, 20% is based on the services the company provides, 20% is based on the interaction with the sales rep. Does the prospect like the rep? Are they knowledgeable, etc.? And then maybe 10% is based on content. Again, these are broad strokes generalizations, but just trying to paint that picture. Then when you get into the enterprise, it's a little bit more balanced. The sales rep is, there's more meetings, there's more internal selling to be done. So, the product isn't everything, but, and services is obviously very important in the enterprise as well. So that starts to balance out. But if you break this down across all these types of purchases, you could say that on average, 60% of the buying decision that someone makes is based on the product. Let that sink in for a bit, right? 60% of the buying decision is made based on the product. if you take that number and apply it to a sales pipeline, so in this case, we've got a sales team and they've got 5 account executives, right? If we look at one account executive, let's say I'm the top AE at my company, and we're trying to compare the revenue impact that I have versus the revenue impact that our product manager has. So I'm the top rep. I've got $375,000 in pipeline. My close rate is 20%. So within the year, I'm going to close $75,000 worth of business. That's obviously pretty small. Hopefully your pipelines are bigger than that, but we'll just take that as an example. So that sales rep is going to do $75,000 worth of deals. If you look at a product manager, the product manager, the AEs will go narrow and deep with their specific accounts. The beauty of product is product has the ability to touch every single one of these AEs deals. Obviously, product doesn't have full ownership over those deals. The AE owns the deals, but product is going to influence every single deal in a SaaS pipeline. So if you're looking at the product leader, there's 1.15 million in total pipeline for this company. The total revenue that they're going to get at a 20% win rate is $230,000. Product's influence, if we go back to the last slide, is 60% of the overall revenue that a company will make. Therefore, we could argue that product's revenue impact in this case is $138,000, which is almost double what an AE would be able to bring to the table. So obviously product isn't always getting those commission checks, but if you think about it in terms of a modern SaaS business, the impact that a product person is going to have on sales is at least as much, if not significantly greater than what an individual rep can do. Now, I want to be extremely clear that I am not shitting on sales. I am a former salesperson. I will be a salesperson at heart forever. And I really believe that sales teaches you the fundamental skills that can be applied to any role you have in the future. It was such an amazing, building block learning experience for me in my career. And I think the magic in SaaS is if you have an amazing product with product-led go-to-market. So, you're letting people try before they buy, and that experience from freemium to conversion to upsell is product-led. If you have those two things, plus you have smart, thoughtful salespeople, that's how you achieve beautiful high growth scale in today's SaaS. And I would welcome anyone's opinions, but from what I've seen, that's really the magic in the world of SaaS today. So why do I bring up my friend Dr. Evil here? We're not so different, you and I. So as I have been thinking about, as I made the transition from sales to product, I've really started to, I always love to look for patterns, and I've consistently seen throughout, the last 6 to 8 months, these patterns emerge for the things that I learned in sales, how those can be applied to a role in product, and ultimately how those can make you successful. And so I wanted to highlight, if you take an account executive and a product manager, really, they're not that different, as Dr. Evil would say. So account executives prioritize their accounts and opportunities based on the level of customer pain that exists. Account executives need to rally a committee of stakeholders to purchase their solution. If you've done deals, rallying that buying committee is one of the most difficult things you can do. Juggling stakeholders, different personalities, different priorities, it's extremely difficult. Product managers, on the other hand, prioritize not accounts and opportunities, but prioritize features and product updates also based on the level of customer pain. So, which deals should I focus on? Which features should I build? It all depends on, where is the pain the greatest, and that's likely, where you should focus. Product managers, very similarly, need to rally a group of developers rather than, buying stakeholders. Product managers are rallying developers to effectively build and ship their solution. So very similarly, you're selling to, your iOS engineer and your Android engineer and your back-end guy and your front-end guy. You're trying to bring everyone together cohesively to build a great product. So there's a lot of really interesting similarities between these two, and I want to dive a little bit deeper on some of the core common threads that make salespeople potentially great product managers. So I've tried to boil it down to 11 sales skills. And again, this is purely just based on my experience. Would welcome anyone's thoughts and feedback. I'm not saying this is, I know the be all and end all of great PMs and great salespeople, but these are some of the patterns that I've seen that I think are pretty interesting. I did want to call out, why am I so passionate about this sort of the concept of common threads and how salespeople can transition to product? The reason there is I found that these non-linear career paths can carry a good amount of stigma, right? So as I was selling and having success in sales, I could really feel amongst my peers that I was branded as a salesperson. And if you're a salesperson, especially if you're successful, the thought of you moving out of sales, like, whoa, no, like, man, you're a sales guy, go sell, like that's your thing. I really found that it was hard to sort of break that mold and to get people used to the fact that, hey, I'm actually passionate about this area. And yes, I had success in sales, but I want to make this move and I want to make this change. I'm lucky that my colleagues have been super supportive, but the concept of nonlinear career paths, I was director of sales. I'm now a product manager. So I've, taken a step down in terms of seniority, and that can have some, the optics of that aren't always the best, but definitely want to encourage you, if you're thinking about it, it can be an extremely rewarding change. The second thing is it's easy to get intimidated and you will feel dumb as a salesperson, jumping into a product role, working with developers. You're going to feel like a moron a lot of times, but you just got to embrace that and try not to get intimidated. And hopefully you've got great folks around you to support you. And the last reason here I wanted to talk about this specifically is it can be hard to find your bearings on do's and don'ts. So really the goal here is, if you're thinking about making the switch from sales to product, these are sort of the anchors that you can have that made you successful in sales that you should carry, I believe you should carry forward into a product role to, sort of have those do's and don'ts of the things that, just from someone who's experienced it, the things that you can sort of count on that made you successful in sales and bring those to product. So those 11 things are: be passionate, be curious, be coordinated, be likable, be self-aware, be healthily skeptical, stay focused, be analytical, be understanding, be prescriptive, and be thorough. That's spelled wrong, but we're going to roll with it. Cool. So I've broken these down into 3 sections. Part 1 is around communication. First one is be passionate, embrace the founder mentality. So as a salesperson, it's so crucial to think like a founder and to really embrace the why of the company. If you can clearly articulate why your company exists, which generally speaking, the founders can do very well. If you can have that founder mindset as a salesperson, that rubs off on people and people want to buy into the vision. Very similar in a product role. If you are able to clearly articulate, why the company exists, what we stand for, what we're trying to do in the market to your developers, that's something that people really buy into and they can get behind because it's clear that you stand for something. Number 2 is be curious. Thoughtful questions are the key. Any good salesperson knows that questions, open-ended and threaded questions are the key to getting deeper, to building relationships, to understanding pain points and understanding different stakeholder perspectives. Very similar from a, working with your developers, working with your customers. The more that you can structure your questions to be open-ended, to get people talking and to really not close off the conversation, not throw out yes or no things, that, make people feel heard and make them, very clear, make it very clear that you're interested in what they have to say, and then listen very intently. Thoughtful questions are so, so important, and you learn that in sales, and they're so applicable in a product perspective. We already talked about this a little bit. Get coordinated. So stakeholder alignment drives velocity. And I'll give an example from a sales perspective here. So it's so easy in sales to be talking to different people and to be getting different answers. And then when you bring everyone together, the perspectives are not aligned, and ultimately people aren't going to buy, right? So the faster that you can get everyone in a room, get everyone on the same page, get them agreeing to, why this is the right direction, you can address concerns, people can, have their banter. That is how you get a deal done quickly, right? You have to have alignment across your stakeholders. It's so similar to when you're building product, because if you're trying to find a solution to a product problem, you could have, talk to a back-end developer and they could tell you one thing. A front-end person might have a different perspective. Your designer is likely to have a different perspective. Your customers are likely to have a different perspective. So really making sure that when you're trying to find a solution to a problem, get everyone in the same room, get them to debate, because you'll always uncover things that you didn't know, and it's very hard to understand, whose perspective is the right one, or maybe there's a solution no one ever thought about. So get everyone in the same room, get coordinated. It's going to lead to less confusion and more action for your team. Next one here is make friends. Sounds simple, but I always talked about, from a sales perspective, if you don't know, the person you're selling to, if you don't know their girlfriend or boyfriend's name, if you don't know where they grew up, if you don't know what they like to do, you're probably not going to win a deal, because ultimately people like to buy from people they're friends with, or people they like. Very similar in a product perspective. You have to really go out of your way to take genuine interest in your teammates, your customers, and your developers' lives. So take genuine interest both personally and professionally. Second is be humble, but know when to stand your ground and back it up with research. So, as a salesperson, it's so key to have your anchors. What do you know, or what's your company's take on the market that no one else knows, right? So making sure that you can stand your ground, you can stand up to executives, you can challenge them, same sort of thing, right? If you're in conversations with your development team, you have to be able to stand your ground, and because people will try to push you around, you have to have done the research. You have to know, here's the facts, here's how I can stand my ground, here's why I'm taking this approach. You still want to be humble and, again, be open to all perspectives, but pick your marks and know when to stand your ground. And then the last one is tell customer stories to make it relatable. As a salesperson, you would know that any customer story, if you can put your prospect in the shoes of one of your customers who is already successful, that helps them feel more comfortable buying. Same sort of thing working with your development team. To a developer, customers, without a face, it's hard for them to relate, right? So the more that you can say, Mary at X company felt this pain point and it stopped her from achieving this goal, the more that you can surface those stories, it helps your dev team relate, and ultimately it just helps them buy into what you're trying to do as a business, and it helps you build your relationship with them. This is a fun one. As you can see, I've got a lot of energy, and this is something that I struggle with, being self-aware. So energy and enthusiasm are very important in both sales and product management. You need to be high energy. You want to be getting people inspired, getting them excited for the work that you're doing, but you want to be aware of tone and timing. So if you're working with your development team, they may not, there's a time to be high energy and there's a time to shut up and put your headphones on. Same sort of thing if you're in sales. If you're selling to an executive, your approach, who's extremely serious, your approach to them might be very different, much more cut and dry, much more numbers oriented than if you're selling to a champion who's more your age, younger, more casual, etc. So be self-aware, understand who you're talking to, and then judge your energy, your tone, and your timing based on that. Part 2, prioritization. Got to give a shout out to Dilbert. I love this. Let me know which group I should stop working on. Essential, critical, or must-have. In both sales and product, it's so hard, as we talked about, to get the signal from the noise and figure out which thing should I work on first, which deal should I work on first, which feature should I build. So one of the best ways to get the signal from the noise is to be healthily skeptical. It sounds a little bit cynical, but don't take everything at face value. If someone tells you, hey, I think this deal is going to close tomorrow because this, and this, ask why, right? If someone tells you, oh, we need to build this feature and that's going to that's going to close this many deals and all that stuff, we need this now, I need to solve this pain point. Ask why. Peel back layers. Avoid the happy ears. Don't take everything at face value, because a lot of times that, if you do, it'll lead you to a rash decision, and that'll end up, you'll build a feature without getting the full input, and maybe it's not actually the solution that you would have come up with if you had asked a few more questions. So avoid happy ears at all costs. Next one is be focused. Seems easy because we're saying that in the prioritization section, but the thing I think about here, and the parallel between sales and product, in sales, having your North Star oftentimes is your ideal customer, right? So what does my ideal customer look like? What's the size of business? What industries make sense? What stakeholder groups do I normally have success selling to? And if I have 10 deals, I should probably be focused on the ones that look most like our other customers that are successful. It's so easy to chase deals, people who are telling you the right things, deals that sound great, but maybe it's a bit of a stretch. That your ideal customer profile is your North Star. In product, your product vision is your North Star, right? So if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to say, okay, if you have 5 features that you could build today, you're going to scrap these ones and focus on this one. Having the product vision of where your business is trying to go is extremely important for prioritization and focus. Prioritize data. And I will be the first to admit that this is something that I am constantly trying to get better at. But without a foundational data layer, you're driving blind. There's a reason that Salesforce.com is one of the biggest, most successful SaaS businesses, because Salesforce data is gold, right? It helps you understand which deals are moving quickly, which deals have the most activity, et cetera. And if you're not using that data to inform your prioritization, then you're driving blind, right? So, we definitely encourage you to look at things like Insight Squared and Funnel Cake, these companies that help you look at your Salesforce data and figure out, which actions you need to take at which times. Same sort of thing in product. We're looking at installing Segment and Amplitude and App Queues and all these things to get that sort of foundational data layer, because the longer you go making decisions based on instinct, the more risk you run of making wrong decisions and going down the wrong path. It is so easy, no matter what role you're in, to make assumptions and to justify those assumptions and to skip over the data. So prioritize the data and get that foundational data layer in as soon as you possibly can. Part 3 is problem solving. So first one here is be understanding. Listen closely. In a sales perspective, you always want to be listening, be the sounding board. If someone's going to buy from you, it's because they've got a pain point that they want to address. If they don't have a pain point, then you're probably not going to have a deal, right? So listen closely and diagnose the pain and ask questions to get to the root of the issue. That's what ultimately the best salespeople are listening 90% of the time, and they're talking 10% of the time, right? Same sort of thing from a product perspective, exactly like we were just saying. The more you make assumptions about people's problems, or the more you jump to conclusions about what their problem is and how you could potentially solve it, you could run the risk of missing what the actual problem is, because they could tell you one thing, but you ask, I've had a lot of different scenarios where they say, I really want this. I really want this solution to solve this problem I have. And then you ask, okay, well, why do you think that's the right solution? Can you help me understand your problem a little bit better? And the more that you peel back those layers and listen and ask thoughtful questions, the more that you can get to the root of the issue and then clearly diagnose the pain. Once you've got your finger on the pain, then you can come up with the solution and problem solve. Now, once you clearly understand the pain, it's so important in both sales and product to be prescriptive, right? So design a solution. You're not going to win a deal unless you can put together a compelling business case, especially the bigger the deal gets. If you can't talk about the ROI, talk about the benefits that the business is going to get, good is better than perfect. And the important thing there is you want to build a potential sort of solution and a business case, and then you want to put it in front of the prospect and ask for feedback, right? You want to build it with them. The best business cases are built not just by the salesperson, but collaboratively with the prospect. Same sort of thing in product. In product, your solution is your wireframes, your mock-ups, your sketches. You don't rush to high fidelity designs right away, but once you understand clearly the pain, put some ideas out there and be prescriptive of, here's some potential solutions, and then work with your users as much as possible in user testing to refine that solution to get from good to perfect. And the last one here is be thorough. Make sure you're talking to all the right stakeholders, not just the ones who will take your call. In sales, it's so easy to spend time with people who, they're telling you all the right things, right? Oftentimes, those are the people who don't have the influence or the authority, but they've got the time, so they'll spend it with you, right? So it's so important to understand, who makes that buying decision? Can we get some time on their calendar? What are their priorities? If you're not talking to all the people involved in a decision, you're likely not going to win the deal. In product, it's so similar, except here you need to be talking to all your different types of users. So I was guilty of this in the early days. I was only having conversations with our power users, right? And what your power users will tell you is going to be very different from what your sort of mid-tier users will tell you, from what your very infrequent users will tell you, right? So make sure you're getting, when you're trying to come up with ideas, you're getting a cross-section of perspectives. You're not just focusing on getting input from the power users who will take your call, because you really need to understand, a lot of times you don't want to cater to the power users because they're going to use your product regardless. You want to cater to the people who you need to drive adoption with, you need to drive more stickiness, and you need to make sure that you're being thorough and talking to a nice mix of your different users, very similar to how you would talk to sales stakeholders. So that's it. I really hope this was helpful. Would love for you to connect with me. Hit me up on Twitter at Evan Lewis. Please add me on LinkedIn. Send me an email. If any of this was interesting, if you just want to connect, I really hope you enjoy the rest of the conversations at the Product-Led Summit. And yeah, thanks so much again for listening. Take care.